Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Uncorked with the Miss Independent podcast here on YouTube. Today's guest is the wonderful Sasha Korbut, a Russian American multidisciplinary artist whose work spans filmmaking, writing, and performance, as well as yoga.
With a background that bridges journalism, dance, and visual storytelling, Sasha brings a uniquely embodied perspective to exploring themes of identity and human connection. We're thrilled to welcome Sasha for this conversation where we'll be discussing his two short films, Incomplete and To Novosibirsk, as well as diving into his creative journey and the ideas that continue to shape his work.
Hello, guys.
Hi,
Hi,
how
Sasha,
are
how are
you?
you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you doing?
Good. How's
Good.
your day been today? What have you been up to?
Fantastic. Well, I woke up, I had a lunch with my colleague, and I read a book, and now here I am with the two of you.
What are you reading?
I'm reading The Rules of Civility by Amor Towles, I think his last name pronounced. It's about, I think it was George Washington who wrote the 110 Rules of Civility, how
Oh
we're
my God.
supposed to act in the polite society. So that's my gradual learning. It's a great book.
Well, thank you for joining us here today. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yes, me too. Sasha, we would love to know more about how you first got into filmmaking and where that passion started for you.
Yeah, I think it started. I was 11 years old, and I saw a movie by Pavel Chukhrai called The Thief back in the, I think it's late 90s, early aughts. Late 90s, it was a big Russian drama that was nominated for Academy Awards at that time. And it was the 18 plus kind of film that the kids were not supposed to see. And I just overheard adults talking about it
Mm.
one day. I spent a lot of time with my mom and dad and their company. I was the only child, and it's like this. It's like the Adam's apple. Oh, it's like the apple that
Yes.
you want to bite. And so, at the age of 11, I saw this film that was considered one of the finest films of indie cinema back in Russia when in the 90s indie cinema pretty much didn't exist. Neither film industry nor the cinema on international scale, on international scope. And so I saw this film. I was so inspired and impressed. It was a simple story of a post-war that a mother and a son meeting this man on a train who shows up as a military former soldier and
Mm.
ends up being a thief. And so they go from town to town to rob the families that are also barely survive after the World War II. And it's all narrated through the prism of this little kid who is like 11-year-old, who was the same
Wow.
as I was. And I was so touched by the narrative and the storyline. And that was the first indie film that I saw. I think if we literally take your question, where did the film journey begin?
Mm.
I think it was not with Home Alone or Princess Bride or Beauty and the Beast, but it was with this film, The Thief. So yeah.
Do you feel like that film has bled into the films that you've made so far?
um, I haven't thought about it, but I do remember that after seeing this film, we had an assignment at school at our class, literature class, and we had to write the story. And I wrote a story about something, how I lost my brother from the illness, and it was a dramatic kind of piece, a short story. And the next day, a teacher read this story out loud to everyone and saying, what an excruciating, heart-wrenching story of a poor 11-year-old kid slash your classmate who lost his brother. And the whole class was like, oh my God, Sasha, I'm so sorry. And I was like, my brother is alive. And that was fiction actually inspired by the movie The Thief. Because what do you do when you're a kid or when you're just starting as an artist? You first copy, and then by
Mm.
copying and adding a little bit of yourself throughout the time, you ended up polishing your own style. But I think it all starts with a copy. Everything is a copy. So
Yeah.
I think it affected my writing before it affected my directing or or screenwriting. So it affected like just a short story writing. But so far, I directed only two films that one of them I co-wrote, the other one I wrote. One is called Incomplete. The other one is called To Novosibirsk that is coming out this year. Both of them are exploring human connection and sense of belonging. It's kind of a theme that I've been exploring for the past 20 something years, and I feel like it's gonna stay with me. And back then, yeah, that short story was not far from that either.
Do you have a preference of writing or directing?
I think it's like left hand use versus right hand use. I need them both for different purposes. There are films that I watch and I say, oh, I wish I wrote it. There are others that I watch and I say, I wish I directed.
Mm.
And like when I saw the Fleabag for the first time, a TV series, I thought, oh, I wish I wrote it. And then, um, let's say an example, let's say It Was Just an Accident by Jafar Panahi that came out this year. I would say, I wish I directed it.
Mm.
I saw Train Dreams, Joel Edgerton's latest film.
Yeah.
And I said, oh my God, I wish I wrote it and directed it. So like, I wish I could use both hemispheres of my brain. Um, they are in separate, but I think if you would ask what dominates, I perceive life through words more than I perceive life through images. Words feels more important to me than the image. That's why I'm not so active on Instagram, neither as an audience nor as a contributor, because imagery is not as exciting to me as written words.
How did your two short films come about? Were you the one who took initiative, or were they presented to you in some way? How did that come together?
Let's start with the first one, Incomplete. That was a short film that I co-wrote with Peter Workman and directed it. It came out from the idea to explore the theme of love and misconnection. It started all with a poetry. It started with words. I wrote this poetic piece that you can describe as a love letter to someone you've never met. It started as a text in the first place, as a poetry piece, and then I met my co-writer, Peter Wortman, who was an established Hollywood writer who recently retired, and I brought him this idea, and it took us a few years to develop it into the script. And the reason it took years, not months, because the pandemic hit and we had this break. And in some way, it was kind of great because we took time. Because even though it's a short film, even though it's a short film, the concept is quite long. And so it took me hundreds of interviews and hundreds of hours of interviews with different people on this topic and hundreds of hours of conversations with Peter to understand how do we want to portray. And when we started to talk about it, I said, listen, I think there is three type of main kind of connections that every single human being is searching for. It's the physical, intellectual, and the spiritual. So the intellectual, you understand, if you bond and you can bond with one only, right? First,
Yeah.
intellectual, you can become partners, you can become professionals, you can become creators. Then there's the spiritual, it's kind of that kinship that we feel. And then there's the physical, it's the chemistry, something that is outside of our control. And when we yearn for someone we've never met, we often encapsulate all those three connections and seeking for them in one person. And I said, let's try to put it into the film. And because I have a background in dancing, I've been dancing professionally for a couple of decades. I started dancing when I was 4. I said maybe dance would be a great outlet to express those kind of connections. We would still have words. There's still going to be a narrative, but dance will become that tool that will translate what is the main character, who is the seeker, connections, and it's his story of one day of his life. So maybe dance is going to be that coded language,
Yes.
his fantasy that helps him to um, translate and wonder about like,
Mhm.
what does the physical connection feels like, what does the intellectual connection feels like, da da da. So that's where the incomplete came from. And as I mentioned, I started this project in 2019 and 2018, and we finished the film in 2023, and it premiered in Provincetown Film. It's actually premiered in Jacob Burns Film Center, and then played in New York and Roxy Cinema and Quad, and then went to British Film Institute in London, where we had international premiere, and the response was overwhelming.
Wow.
It still is from people. It's the testimonies, so it's not much they ask. It's just people say. I believe sometimes it's the job of an artist. I had the conversation with Jafar Panahi last month when I met him during his tour with It Was Just an Accident, and I could see how tired he was from traveling so much. And what I noticed, the people who would approach him, it's not that they had something to ask, it's more that they had something to say. And I think the side effect of a job as an artist is when you finish your art piece, your product, and you put it out there, it's mostly you become a listener, a
Mm.
listener. And sometimes it can be a positive feedback, sometimes it can be a criticism, at other times it can be just a snap reaction that a person later would probably regret, and at times it can be just a form of sincerity that comes. But I do believe that artist's job, one of them,
Mm.
especially the post art creation, is to become a listener, because you already said something. People respond, and it would be great if you would be patient enough to listen.
Mm.
I think that's a really good point. I watched your short film this weekend, and your response that you just said now with people reacting, I read a lot of the comments, and
Mm.
it's interesting also when you do put it out there and people have kind of a reaction to it, and everyone reacts differently. And I think a really big strength of this short film was the three types of connections. And I think
Mm.
that's easily shown in that film as well. So people who may resonate with words or who may resonate with visuals, you've created a story that's able to be accessible to a lot of people and access a lot of emotions.
Thank you. I hope so too, and I think art piece or any kind of art piece is a living organism, even though it's done. I mean, it's a little bit different with theater because you can always revive the theater. You can create whether it's sequel or remake, but let's talk about the art piece as a complete form, whether it's Mona Lisa or it's Devil Wears Prada or it's a Beatles song. In different time, it's going to hit differently. So I was recently even thinking about the film, The Incomplete. We had such a great response a couple of years ago when it came out, and I'm still getting messages from people that I'm pretty flattered. Was it what I expected in the first place? No, no, it wasn't. I actually, maybe my ego talked that it probably gonna be bigger. Now
Yeah.
I'm looking at this film right now, 2 years later, and I was like, nice first film. Could have done better. But what I was to say, maybe 10 years later, I would look at it again and say, oh, it's actually not that bad. Or someone else would look at it and say, oh, it perceived differently now. How many stories do we know that something that came out at a time that a person thought right was a
Mm.
wrong timing, and then 20 years later, it would become a hit? It's when the person dies. But there are exceptions like Chapel Roan, who releases Big Pony Club in 2021 and nobody cares, and then 2024 it's the biggest hit. We're talking about 4 years, which is a very little time, but I find it fascinating. What I'm trying to say is that there is there is an art piece and reflection to it with each year
Mm.
as we grow and as the things change in the world is going to be different.
Do you think that due to the pandemic, that it was actually received differently than it would have been otherwise?
I thought about it because when we started to write this film in 2018, we I came to Peter and said, "Listen, this film is going to be about the pandemic of loneliness."
Wow.
Then
Okay.
and then the pandemic hit. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, okay. So now we have actually an opportunity to live it in some form. So it's interesting how sometimes art catches with time, or vice versa, time catches with art. Or in this case, it was art creation. So yeah, I think it was. Maybe
Yeah.
what happened during the pandemic with us guys, we became a little bit more aware, a tiny anxious, vulnerable,
Yeah.
which means perceptive and receptive. When you become vulnerable slash perceptive and receptive, you're happy by watching a sunset or like having a fresh apple, and you also become more emotional about the art. It did play the role.
I mean, especially the loneliness aspect of it all, being feeling sheltered or feeling so distant from other people. And I think especially when it comes to wanting to be with someone and you don't even know who that is yet, going through the pandemic and seeing a film like that afterwards would have a massive impact on anyone who went through anything similar, or even somebody who maybe felt that way, even though the circumstances were different, you can still feel those emotions. I think the timing, it was perfect.
Yeah, and the timing is something you cannot control.
Yeah.
Reading Joachim Trier profile in the New Yorker a few months ago, and someone talks about Joachim, who he's the director of Sentimental Value, the film that
Mm.
gets so much attention right now, and I'm a big fan of his work. But somebody said that about directors and filmmakers, that directors by nature are control freak, but
Mm.
Joachim knows what he can control and what he cannot, and what he cannot, he just let those things flow. I can subscribe under these words because time is something you can't control. So it's so liberating actually to understand what you can control and be in charge of it. You can be bossy, you can own it.
Yeah.
So time is something that is out of our control, and it's okay.
With the film, with the dancing sequences, did you have that choreographed or was that very much like free form? You let that up to the actors?
When I set to direct the film, I knew that I know nothing about filmmaking in terms of doing it. I mean, I used to be a dancer, and I did some acting on the side for commercials and some background acting for major Hollywood films and streaming TV, but I've never been in the chair of director. So that was humbling because I told myself I'm going to hire the best ones and they're
Mm.
going to do the job. And that's what I pretty much did. My whole team was a professional crew. We had a wonderful DP, John Adres from Brazil, Pontus Lidberg, who plays the lead role. He's a established choreographer,
Mm.
dancer, and filmmaker himself. Corey Michael Smith, whose voiceover we hear, and the guy in the phone booth, he's a notable actor in both theater and film. And then when it came to choreography, there was this, I call him always Juilliard kid, Adam Baruch, who is a notable choreographer in a New York scene. And I knew that Adam would be the right person to choreograph because we understand each other sentimental nature and our way of moving and thinking about what choreography is and how to utilize it is quite aligned. If you watch the film, you may notice it's not full of, it's not all that jazz. It's not,
Mm,
Bob Fosse. The choreography is not there to impress your eye and to show off the human ability to move rather than to translate something intimate, which is usually quiet, subtle, and simple. And
mm,
those words serve the compass because it's mostly the camera that dance and it encapsulates the dancers on the screen, and it was the dance between the camera and the actors who were in it, who were professional dancers, all of them. So I did not choreograph it, and I didn't do any kind of work. I just sat in a chair. I don't even know how to press the button on a camera. So I'm that kind of filmmaker.
Sasha, I didn't know that you had a background in dance, so that was really interesting to discover. Both of my parents were professional ballet dancers, so I grew up around dance. What dance did you do? Were you classically trained, or how did that come about in your life?
Yeah, it all started with asthma. At the age of 4, I developed asthma, and my mom decided that you need to move. You need to physically do some activity in order to cure it. My mom believed in exercise and stuff, and I was more like a theater kid who wants to, hang out with girls and watch something theater rather than go and do some mixed martial art things. My mom was a school teacher that works at the what do you call it? Like an additional education system.
Mm,
I forgot the term. And we had those dance classes that you could take for free. And just to give a setup, I know we're sort of getting introduced to each other, but I was born in Soviet Union, raised in Russia. I was born in 1987, so it's still Soviet Union, and everybody lives in clusters. It's like 11 people in Bushwick apartment. That was like a normal kind of lifestyle, and nobody had money, and
yeah.
many things were free. So my mom put me on this dance school, which was a ballroom dance, folk dance, all type of dance, and just for the sake of moving. And I hated dancing until I was 15 or 16. I kept doing it because somebody told me to do. Uh, but I didn't enjoy it much, to be honest. And then later in life, when I decided to take charge of my life, and I was in high school and I started to do ballroom dance professionally, which means I would go to competitions. And it was such a big money investment that I talked to my partner at that time, Alina, and I said, Alina, we're not gonna make any money with it. We are poor and we'll become more poor. So why don't we go and start to make money with it? And so we created our little show. And I was 16, she was 15, and we started to work. Our first job was at a nightclub, which my mom and her mom came with us, which was utterly embarrassing at midnight.
Aw.
And I remember my mom, who's a very conservative woman and doesn't watch much dance after 9 p.m., when she walked in with me to, I don't know how many things you can say on your podcast, but let's say you can.
You can say whatever you'd like.
We're walking to the backstage, and my mom sees this female stripper holding the ice cubes, massaging her nipple so they could get hard. And my mom, with all her conservatism, didn't even know that you can use ice cubes for such thing. Now she's like, "You're not gonna work here." I'm like, "No, mom, stop it. She's just here to, she needs to get her nipples hard and perform. She has to perform, mom." And then she said, "Okay, you're downgrading to 9 p.m. weddings and birthday parties, but you're not working at a nightclub." And we did it for a couple of years, and then we started to work in a nightclub. And then my life took off. I started to get some international contracts, working in Korea, Spain, and eventually I got a scholarship at the Joffrey Ballet in New York City, and that's how I got to the United States. I was already a formed adult with some career behind,
Mhm.
but that was my ticket to the US. and I came
Wow.
here. So dance was always part of my life as a it first it it started with asthma. It got into the business, eventually got me a ticket to come to New York, and it all turned into filmmaking, which I'm happy because filmmaking now seems a bit more sustainable on a especially
Yeah.
body than dancing.
I was going to say you came to New York and you never left.
Never left. I never left, but never say never. So we'll see what's gonna
Never
happen.
say never. Do you ever go back?
I mean, I'm a US citizen right now.
Yeah.
I came to New York I think it was June 1st, 2012. I haven't left since then. And when we say you haven't left, meaning I made my life work here, taken multiple trips and tried to break up with New York many times. And
Mm.
somehow the breakup didn't work. I read over the summer, I read Lena Dunham essay on her breakup with New York City, which I encourage anybody who lives in New York to understand if the breakup will ever come. This is the best free therapy one can receive. And when it comes from Lena Dunham, um, sign me up. Uh, but in my case, I stayed here and I'm now, and I don't know what's going to be tomorrow, but we'll see.
Tell us a little more about this other film that hasn't been released yet.
Well, it's called To Novosibirsk. And when people ask me why the title so complex, I was like, well, that's the name of the city in Russia. And I said, like, listen, if you can say Reykjavik in Iceland, you can learn Novosibirsk. It just takes a little bit more effort. It's not that bad.
We're going to have to practice.
We're gonna have to practice, but I think it was intentional in some way to expand the geography of our minds. To Novosibirsk came out from Incomplete, but in an indirect way, just to give like a little bit of a background. When I set up to do Incomplete, as I mentioned, I wanted to bring the best of the best, and I was lucky to have access to certain people because I worked in film industry already for a number of years. It was about 10. My I worked as a writer for magazines. I wrote for Filmmaker magazine, Out magazine, and then I worked for the New York Film Festival, contributed to the New Fest, Telluride Film Festival, and then joined distribution company Corinth Films. So my industry background was strong enough to have those connections, bring those people, pay them all, and take this immense amount, which to me felt like immense amount of money in order to make the film. So by the end of Incomplete, I felt financially devastated, so scared that first of all, I don't know how I would be able to survive in the city, paid the debt, but all the other thought was I'll never be able to make my next film just because it was so expensive. And I was with my friend in Chicago. We went there for Sundance. Sundance has this kind of pop-ups, and we were in Chicago, both inspired by the films that we've seen, that which were all small films. And he said, we were standing in the traffic, and he said, Sasha, you have to go and do something very small, fast, and it has to be just the exit from that anxiety and fear of believing that you're not capable to do anything else. And to clarify, it's not that I didn't have an idea what to do. Some people believe they have only one film in their mind, one book in their mind, one song in their mind. That was
Yeah.
not the issue. I felt like my Bank of America account is not very, friendly. Not to say badly things about Bank of America. If that's the sponsor, guys, I'm so sorry. You can delete. Or if it's not, I hope it will become your sponsor for real and good. Is that Novosibirsk came from that place because I put so much money and time in making Incomplete. It took 5 years. It took about 35 to $40,000 to do it, and all these notable names. And To Novosibirsk was the opposite. I wrote it in 2 hours with a month of editing. We shot it in one day for $0. And when I say zero, it sounds fun. Of course, it wasn't zero, but it was closer to zero than closer to $45,000. And it was a project. like you're creating a project to come out of the other project. So the film itself was the project itself. You're like, okay, I'm gonna come out, and I wrote the story, which I was so interested in, about one day of a father and a son spending time in a Brighton Beach, and the father is American and the son is Russian American, and it was a very delicate um, issue that they experience because we learn that a father is going through divorce, that he's divorcing his mom, but what the kid knows and the father doesn't, that the moment they divorce, mom is going to take the son back to Russia, back to Novosibirsk. And it's all that emotional turmoil that the kid is experiencing because he came from Russia to readapt to a new lifestyle. And now an adult says, you know what? It didn't work. We're going to go back. But he also understands that it will fracture the bond that he has with his father. And so the film trying to explore that very little issue of how kids are incapable sometimes to communicate such things with the parents, and it's the parents that's supposed to do the job. But in this film, it's the kid who brings up and who sort of tells the father to face the problem. It was about also how kids, when they scream, I hate you, they mean I need you.
Yeah.
And so, as I said, it was a 90-minute film. I wrote it for certain actors. It was for this little 12-year-old kid that I knew from my friend that wanted to be an actor at the age of 11, and his part, and then he said, no, I think football is more interesting. I think he's not into football. And it was this American actor who spent 15 years in Russia, Steven Oxner. And Steven at that time was a full-time employed by BAM. He did this play, Our Class, that he won Lucille Lortel Awards at the exact time when the film premiered in Provincetown. And sort of, the recognition came to him in theater more than in film, but he's a professional actor. He was with us on set, and but he's not. I'm not like, sorry, Stephen, I love you, but I'm not an actor on a IMDb scale. And we had one celebrity on set, which for us it was a celebrity. It was Tom Broker, who I actually had lunch today with. And Tom is the costume designer for SNL. And we met after Incomplete, and we really bonded. And I said, Tom, I'm making this little film. He gave me some notes on the script. And I asked him, can you help me with costume? And he said, of course I will. And he was absolutely brilliant because I know nothing about costumes. And said, Sasha, what do you need? And I said, well, this is the story about the father and the son. Father supposed to represent that sort of calmness and stability and security. I think the father is blue, and the son is anxious. He's worried. He's in fear. I think he's alarmed. He's red. He did the job, and it looked fantastic, and I couldn't be happier. I'm working on a new film right now, and on a script, and when you're just starting working, you're still unsure who is going to be what. And this morning I said, well, I have no idea who are going to be the actors in the film or what the music, but at least I have a costume designer. Tom smiled.
Oh, that was clearly not a difficult part, was having this wonderful costume designer to help you in that aspect. What was the most difficult part about making that film?
When you're working with a kid, there's a certain amount of hours that you can work with. And Steven was 6 days out of 7 doing the play. So we only had one. That's the reason we had one day to shoot. It's not because we were so cocky or cool. I said, listen, this film is not going to happen. And my producer, who I met at the Incomplete screening, she was an 18-year-old girl from NYU first year, came to Quad Cinema in 2023 to see the film. She was the only one from NYU who came. And she wrote me a letter later. The next day, she said, I loved your film and I'll do anything with you if you ever have a project. And I said, thank you. I was flattered. But a year
Oh,
later, I remembered that this young producer said she wants to work, and I reached out to her, and she said, We're doing it. Let's do it." And at some point, I said, "Lisa, we're not going to do it because nobody is available." And she said, "Sasha, leave it to me." And she did some magic, and she found one day that was a day off in October, and that's why we shot it in one day. So kudos to producers who can put these things together. So talking about logistics, that was the hardest one. But I think in my case, for my job, what I'm thinking right now, it all comes from the screenwriting. Um, I remember having a conversation after Incomplete premiered. A few companies got interested in my work. I had a meeting with A24. I had a meeting with a Searchlight Pictures, and it was kind of a very like Hollywood moment when you release something that someone noticed, and you go and you feel like, oh my God, am I the new voice? And you're like, oh, maybe not. Or maybe yes, I don't know. But we were with the Searchlight, and they said something really interesting that the person I spoke with, he said, we always looking at the script because if the script is poor, things will go wrong on a film set. I also remember Bryan Cranston said, he did this talk at Tribeca Film Festival last year. He said, a C-level script with the A-level actor can bring it to the B level. It's
mm,
not gonna be an A. It's gonna be a B.
yeah.
But like the actor can do this much to do. And I understand that it is, I truly believe it is true. But I think now you're asking about the challenge, and I want to answer directly your question. I would look back to the script and I say, oh, I would change things. I would try
Mm,
to elaborate it more because I had a clear intention of what I wanted to say. And for some people, it reads, and for others, it doesn't. And I think my job as a director and a writer is to translate the message as clear as possible. Always mean to be verbatim, but to translate. And I think some young folks, young filmmakers who really nail it, and I would love to talk to them one day. It's Ava Victor, who you
mm,
recently spoke on your podcast
yes.
about Sorry Baby. Even Julia Roberts agree with you guys. Just FYI. She declared it on during the Golden Globes. But
A
it's all
wonderful moment for Ava. So
it
lovely.
is. Yeah, absolutely. But also Raif Cooper, who just released this series called Helen Harper movie, and it's a I think it's a six-part series, and such a worn out topic. So originally told, absolutely a non-traditional way of storytelling, and it works. And so when I see this kind of work, that actually inspiring because you think, okay, I'm gonna go and work better on my material to make sure that whatever the message I have, whether it's intellectual or emotional, I'll deliver it better. And I think that's the main.
you think that a lot of pitfalls for people who are creative and who are writers specifically is that they try to do too much when you can actually scale it back.
I think you have to do too much
Mm.
first and then polish. And what I think it's in the editing world that when you submit a piece to the editor, you better include more so the editor has something to work with so you can then polish.
Yeah.
I think having it over is better than under to work with something. But filmmaking is such a complex or machine because it's not relationship between the writer and editor only. You know, script is the starting point, and then there are layers. Unfortunately, I don't have the universal wisdom to share here. I think I'm still discovering it, but I don't know. What do you think?
I wrote a film during COVID with a few of my friends, and it didn't get the success that we were aiming for, but we learned a lot. And I think our downfall was that we tried to put so much into a very small amount of time. And it was so overcomplicated when if we had just kept to one concept, I think it would have been cleaner. I think it would have been just easier to absorb because we were trying to cram so much that the intention got lost.
Yeah, and it's great to make mistakes. I mean, congratulations on making it, and double congratulations for learning from it.
I think filmmaking you learn forever. I don't think there's ever one answer. I don't think there's ever one way to do anything. I think you discover, and that's art.
Thank God that you learn forever. Otherwise,
Yeah.
once you reach the ceiling, I think it's the time for retirement. There is a platform where you can learn forever. You cannot reach the ceiling because you can always push the ceiling a little bit higher up.
Yeah. How has being a yoga instructor informed your way of tackling films? Do you feel like that has helped you in some ways?
Hmm. Well, I've been teaching yoga for 10 years now, and I've been practicing for about 13. It's a kind of a directorial work where you basically tell people what to do at
Yeah.
what time. So there is this conductor quality. There is a reliance from students, and practicing it on a daily basis is kind of helpful. I'm not directing every day. I'm not doing movies every day, not writing them every day, but I think I'm maintaining my directing or let's say conducting skills by going through the same script and the same scenario today because yoga nowadays is what I do for a living, is what, pays my bill. Um, so I have to do it. Um, and I think that sounds. Thank you for this question. I've never thought about it. Yeah, because it's. I like to direct. I like to tell people what to do, not
Yeah.
in a condescending way, not in a presumptuous or I'm not getting high from being in control of people, providing guidance and direction, and it's up to them whether they take it or not, but I'm staying with the script. So I think it's a very important to understand. I think this is the gradation between the guide, the tour guide and the tyrant.
Yeah.
If it makes sense. Does it make sense? I think it makes
Yeah.
sense.
I think so. I think also the way you just described it translates to a good director, giving guidance, but allowing the actors to do their job. They were hired for a reason. And I think people who are directors sometimes they tend to micromanage, which can work, but it can also affect the actor. And the actor feels restricted in what they can and can't do. And I think that through the way you just described yoga, I'm sure your directing definitely translates that.
And it's still work in process and learning. And the other thing, teaching an 8 a.m. class different, or like 8 a.m. on Monday is different from a 10 a.m. on Saturday, where a bunch of newcomers who had a massive party last night drag their bodies semi sober and now expecting to be guided. So the quality, the guidance will be different. The energy investment will be different. The outcome from the class will be different. So the circumstances are not always perfect. In fact, rarely they are.
Yeah.
I had this moment with my colleague recently talk about, and I think that class was post Christmas. Teaching it, it was 9 people, and it was one of those rare moments where you feel complete bliss, synergy, and this very short-term relationship that are defined by 60 minutes between the teacher and the student are so aligned. It's a magic. This
Yeah.
magic sometimes happens on a film set between director and an actor, between an actor and another actor, between the cinematographer and actor, you name it. To say it's often, it's not, but when it happens, Jesus, it's so good.
And that's what artists aim for, I think. It's that moment. That's what makes it worth all the struggle because it is a struggle to be an artist. I think it's very rewarding, but I do think there's, good and bad to everything. But those
Totally
moments,
agree. I absolutely agree. I think the being an artist is to swim in the ocean of uncomfortability all the time.
yeah,
You can swim and complain about it. You will complain regardless, but you also have to ask yourself at some point, do you want to swim in that or not? Because this is an uncomfortable job.
it's
It's uncomfortable. It's fancy on a paper, but it's
yeah.
uncomfortable.
Well, you have to learn to relax in the uncomfortable and to be comfortable in the uncertainty of things. And I think that that takes practice and
I
time.
agree. I agree.
Your latest article that was about the 2025 indie films that you reviewed.
Ah,
I would love, Sasha, to hear I know it's hard, but your top three that you would recommend the audience watch.
oh, you need to pull up the list because it's been.
Let's
But
see.
I'm gonna rely on my memory. So we're talking about the article that I wrote about fiction film, the one that is called Looking Forward, Looking Back, that
Mhm.
I published on Medium, and I also put it on Instagram. I remember, okay, so now I have to refresh my memory, but I think what I was talking about at that um, in that article, that 2025 felt particularly the year when I was looking for hope when it
Mhm.
comes to art and especially cinema because I watch so much. So that was the judging bar, I think, and the films that were inspiring to me is the ones that were given hope in one way or another. Sometimes it's directly, and others time is not. But let's start with the one that is now worldwide known, which is Jafar Panahi. It was just an accident, a story
Mhm.
about a former prisoner who encounters with the person who he seems was the person who was torturing him, and he is trying to figure out whether it's him or not. And then throughout the film, we're learning to what degree one innocent and a victim can go. Can the person who's been abused become an abuser now if the coin flip? Person makes such a decision or not? It's in those kind of small, subtle moments where we learn the range of what it means to be a human, and it was definitely in top 10 films I think that I wrote about. There were less known, such as film Drowning Dry, Little Sister's Story, and A Memory, and how memory works. That sometimes we have selective memory. We
Yeah.
remember our father being on a phone call talking to our mom, and he was wearing a blue jacket, and we
Mhm.
were listening, John Lennon, while your brother remembers is completely different. And it wasn't
Yeah.
that we're all in the same room. It's like, no, he was actually in Atlanta, and
Yeah.
it's like those small moments. But Drowning Dry was such an incredible portrait. It was theatrically released in New York and LA, and some people could see it. Unfortunately, very few. It's available now on Mubi. I'm sort of promoting the film. I do not work for this film, but it's necessary to tell about the Axis so people
Mm.
go actually and see it. So it's the film's about hope, and I think sentimental value, the hope in Joachim Trier film, the hope to find some solace in a
Mm.
relationship between the father and the daughter. It was just an accident. It's one battle after another, and the hope. What was the hope about one battle after another? Let me think for a second, because one battle after another was in a different category for me. It's one battle
Mm.
after another. It was just an accident and Secret Agent. I put them in a group of films, Man Against the System. And I
I love
thought
that.
it was so interesting to see a political portrayal of nowadays world in different countries, and also interesting to look. I'm sidetracking your question, but it was interesting to look that one film was Brazilian, the other one was American, the other one was Iranian, and those three give such three different colors and portrayals to the same problem.
Yeah.
So those were my top lists on that. Sentimental value, Emily, help me. What else was in it? I don't remember.
I have it right here. You had Blue Sun Palace.
Oh, Blue Sun Palace was fantastic. No one's seen this film, I felt like. It's our New York-based filmmaker who made such a small portrait about massage therapist workers in Queens. There is a theme of, if you remember or not, but during the pandemic, during the Asian hate, there
Hmm.
were cases when there was a massage therapist attacked and killed. And so she took this topic as the reason, I think, to make a bigger movie and talk about bigger
Mm.
Asian American and Asian community, and specifically Chinese community in Queens. And it was such a beautiful film. I saw it at Metrograph with the director Q&A after. I loved it. I hope more people will see it.
We'll have to review it on the podcast, maybe.
Yeah, add it to the list.
Maybe you can invite her. I
Yeah.
would listen to that talk. Love to hear your insightful questions and her answers.
So, Sasha, part of our podcast is that we pair wine with the indie film that we review. I am very curious to hear what wine you would pair with your two films and why. It can be a type of wine, it can be a specific wine, it can be a label that you like, anything.
Yeah, I think it would be definitely from alcohol wine, free from alcohol, like something that's uh, sobering wine. And the reason for that is, I think it's my relationship that changes to alcohol as an ocean throughout the last years. You talking to Unophile, so just to explain, like years in Spain did the job.
Yeah.
Moving to New York, love for Italy. Um, it would be a sober wine simply because you would focus on the matter of taste
Mm,
rather than this inebriating effect. The thing is with wine, it's almost like this thing with a cigarette, which I think it's absolutely unfair comparison, but in this case, it's like you usually remember the first and the last cigarette in the pack. Or smoker, I can assure you. With wine is that you taste it only in the first glass, and then the second one is just becomes an alcohol. And it's like it's that first taste. It's like a first cup of coffee in the morning.
yeah.
Not taste the same as the second one. And it's not to judge the wine quality. It's more about the effect alcohol can give. So I think the reason I'm saying it would be an alcohol free is that you could actually focus on taste.
I love that.
Thank you for your podcast. I've been listening to your talks, and I think you guys doing such a great job. Even if you don't have a guest, it's just listening to two of you bantering about what did you do today, how did you spend your day, which makes me also appreciate my day spending, but then hear the others. It's almost like the conversation you not have a time to have with your close friend, but also digging into such convoluted topics and trying
Mm.
to find the essence of them. I mean, we didn't talk about heated rivalry, so that was like kind of refreshing not to talk about heated rivalry and talk about something else, which I was anticipating you're gonna ask me as a true Russian, but I'm glad you didn't. Yeah, it definitely creates cause and effect, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, guys. It was a true pleasure to be your guest. I sincerely wish you best of luck with your work, which I think you're creating something essential.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. And please keep us updated on where we can see the screening of your next film.
Yeah, it's playing actually this week in Miami, and closer to the summer, probably Father's Day, it's gonna come out. So there is hope PR campaign for the film. But
Very,
thank you so much for giving me the platform to talk about my work and also ask thoughtful questions.
of course. Thank you.
Are we logging off?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.
We want to give a huge thank you to Sasha for joining us and for sharing his work, his films, and his creative journey with us. It was truly a pleasure. And thank you to our listeners for spending this time with us.
If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to click the like button below and make sure to subscribe for more interviews coming your way. You can find the Miss Independent podcast on all major platforms, which we will list at the end of the episode. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you very soon.
You moved it up.
I didn't. Maybe. Oh, yeah.
Confusing names of cities and places in Russia.
Oh.
Now, can I genuinely ask you for advice? Like, I am.